Hey guys, in this video we're going to answer your top 10 questions that we get regarding flipping.
Okay, number one, how to get started. So I always share this story, but Jared and I started, I think it was like 4 years ago now, and I somehow convinced him to buy this condo we didn't really know anything about and flip it with me. So my advice on getting started is to start small. We invested a little under $20,000 total, and we ended up each making $10,000. So you don't have to have a huge investment to start, but I always say make sure it's money that you could live without. And I always say too, obviously use money that you could live without, but if you're going to try to get into flipping and that's your goal, people spend 40, 50, hundreds of thousands of dollars on college, and you can think about it as an investment in yourself. So maybe you're putting this money in and getting a ton of experience and learning. Maybe you're not making a ton, but now you have all that knowledge to take on with you to the next project. And that's kind of what we did in our first one. Luckily, we made it out okay, but that was also a long time ago when numbers were a little bit different.
How much money do you need to get started in flipping? And again, that varies. For us, we were able to get a conventional loan on a property that was a condo that was very inexpensive. We were able to take $20,000, so essentially $10,000 each, and then double our money. But it just goes back to starting small. What are you comfortable with? Do you have a family that will help you finance, or are you going off your savings? Just don't play with money that you don't have. I think that's the biggest thing. Everyone thinks, flipping became very popular and it was like a hot thing to do, but don't play with money that you don't have. Like if you couldn't afford to lose it, especially while you're learning, I wouldn't recommend investing it.
If you can't lose it, don't use it.
Exactly.
But so your investment can be small to start. You have options such like hard money, which is something we used a lot in the beginning. You can always use conventional financing, but something now that we've learned so much from when we started, and something that we would have probably done back then, or something we would do now if we were starting, would be to start on your own home. So you could buy that as your primary residence. There's first-time homebuyer grants that cover your down payment. You can do small, little things that add value to your home. And then you have 100 different backup plans. You're living in it, you could rent it out. You're not at a high interest rate loan. I just feel like nowadays that's the way I would go.
And Molly touched on hard money. I feel like we could do another video on hard money because it's high interest. There's a lot of risks, especially if you're starting out. So ask questions about that. Don't just lock yourself into a high interest loan to get the cash. You really need to do your homework to protect yourself. Reach out to us if you have questions, but I think that's something we could actually educate people on and really touch on and add some valuable information for. Our third question is the best type of property to invest in on your first flip. One of the things that we always recommend is people want to get in. The way to minimize your risk is to buy a property that you're going to live in. And the reason is, A, you can do your improvements over time. B, if you hang on to it for 2 years, you can sell it and avoid capital gains. Obviously, that's going to increase your profit. But it's a great way to learn about the property, the process, and really minimize your risk versus, say, taking on a property where you need to leverage hard money and you have a high interest payment and your window for renovation as well as your threshold for mistakes is a lot lower. I really think that that's the way to start.
Question number 4, how to determine a budget for a project or what you're going to spend to renovate. That is so specific to the property. I get questions from people all the time that is like, what would it cost to renovate a kitchen? It could be $10,000, it could be $150,000. There's such a big difference depending on the style of the property, the size, the updates that you do. What we did in the beginning that was really, really helpful was we would start walking properties with our contractor. And so we would say, hey, could you give us a ballpark of what this house would cost? And then we would kind of match that to other properties. So if we knew that they both needed a wall taken down, they both were 1,500 square feet and needed kitchen and flooring, we could kind of use that model and that bid that we had originally had and mold it to whatever property we're buying. I would always recommend getting a full bid in your inspection period, but in the event that you can't, just familiarizing yourself with what things cost and how you can kind of customize that to the property that you're looking at is super beneficial. I always say too, walk the property 3 times, because on the 3rd time you'll see things that cost you a lot more than you did on the 1st time. So look at things like, what does the back wall look like? What is the condition of the air conditioning unit? Are there can lights in the house? Things that you don't just automatically assume you have to redo really add up, and I always see way more in cost the 2nd or 3rd time that I walk the property than I do the 1st time.
Our 5th question is how to find deals. We find them a number of ways. We still use MLS to find properties that have great opportunity. We do use wholesalers to some degree. We find that a lot of the margin is already pinched out of those deals, so it's not a consistent thing for us. We've also kind of created great network of people and connections, and people know us, so a lot of deals we find off market, whether it be through a realtor or for a homeowner that's looking to sell and unload a property easily. There's not one way to do it. It's just running your numbers and making sure they make sense before pulling the trigger and moving forward. Question number 6 is an interesting one. It's called fails. What have we learned? What's gone wrong? What's been bad? I guess everyone really focuses on like the success stories, so this is a really good question. I like this.
And I can touch on this one. A couple fails that we've had, or more specifically me, because I think Jared kind of mentioned that I like to jump into things a little bit more, and Jared is a little more analytical. Do your due diligence, so do an inspection, scope your sewer lines. One time we bought a property, completely remodeled it. This was before scoping your sewer lines was a big thing. And the new buyers did a sewer scope, and all of the sewer lines had to be redone. So
Let me just add to that. So we finished the renovation, we listed it on market, the buyers went under contract, and then they did the sewer scope.
Yeah.
Carry on.
And then we found out that the entire sewer system had to be replaced.
Yes.
If you don't know what a sewer system is, it's basically the plumbing underneath your foundation, underneath your floors, everything pretty that you've done that runs outside to your main sewer lines.
Yeah.
So we had to spend like $10,000 to $15,000 to tear up everything we had already done, rerun an entirely new sewer line, and then put everything back together. That was a good one, or a really bad one.
Yeah.
What else? Just a couple things I would say just to double check that you could run into issues would be square footage. Make sure the square footage that you're buying is the actual square footage that the property is. Inspect it, check roof, AC, plumbing, electrical.
And I would say the big thing that we learned early on was be very careful about who you hire. You're bringing in contractors, and there's contractors that can do jobs and save you some money and save that bottom line, your margin, but it can cost you a lot more in the end. We hired some people based off, I'll be honest, cost. They were less expensive, and it hurt us a lot. So now everyone we use is people that we trust. They're not the cheapest, but they do a great job. They provide a great quality product, and we know we won't have headaches down the line.
And then another question we get a ton is, how do you know where to spend your money and what to do to get a good return? So I think that totally depends on your demographic. Somebody in one community might want something completely different than in another, or in one city might want something completely different than in another city. So look at what's selling in the market of where your potential flip is, and look at what's selling quickly and what those other people, like what people have done before you. So just as an example, we live in South Scottsdale, Phoenix. Our market is relatively young, a ton of vacationers, a ton of young professionals. And so because of that, we match what we're flipping to our demographic. So we're putting in big open kitchens, we're doing dual sinks in the master, walk-in closets, that sort of thing, because that's what the people want. As where if you did something in a different community where maybe they don't want those things, you could be spending money where you're not getting a return.
Give the people what they want, right? Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And that brings us to our next question. How do you know who to hire? You don't. It comes from trial and error.
Sure.
But what I would say is make sure you're always using someone licensed, get referrals, because people are very open to tell you how an experience went, especially with a contractor.
And especially
Ask
bad ones.
for references. That's always a really good idea. We've used contractors that if we would have asked for references, they probably wouldn't have been able to give us any.
No.
And we would have saved a lot of headache. But also take care of the people that do well by you. So if you find someone that does amazing work, is well priced, does good quality, shows up when they say they're going to do, bonus them. Treat
care of
them
your
well.
people.
Take them to
If
dinner.
you're making money, they should make money.
And the last question would be, how do you protect yourself if you are flipping? I love this subject personally, but just a couple things that come to mind for me would be how you hold your property. So like for us, we hold each property in a different LLC for liability reasons. Making sure you have the right insurances. So if you're remodeling a property and you don't have an insurance that's specific to allow remodels, that's something you want to look into too. What else? Using licensed people. If you're doing any sort of remodeling, that's really important.
I will say this, there's different opinions, but if you really want to protect yourself, pull permits.
Yep, pull permits, have things inspected by the city.
Obviously from a financial standpoint, again, doing your research in the beginning, knowing your numbers, making sure you're not putting more money into the property than it's worth.
And then on the back end, the last thing that I would close out with is disclosing.
Yeah.
So as a seller or an owner seller, make sure you're disclosing anything that you know about the property to the new or potential buyers. That's just to protect you.
Yeah, and a lot of flippers, whether they're new or not, they'll put in the description on the listing that they never lived in the property and that they're not going to provide a SPUDS or seller property disclosure statement. And really they're doing themselves an injustice. I mean, they're accountable for what they know of the place, so it's better off to, disclose all that information up front as much as you can.
And I think that would wrap it up.
Yeah, protect yourself.
Protect yourself before you wreck yourself.
That's right.
And if you guys have any other questions about flipping, you can always put them in the comments. Or, what is it, heart?
Like, heart.
Okay.
We thank you for your time. Please subscribe and have a great day.